Good morning, good afternoon, LinkedIn friends, HubSpot Nation. We are back for another episode of Let's Build Your Audience in HubSpot with Joshua Oakes. How you doing, man?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's May already, man.
Freshly May. How about that?
Yeah. Um, Hard to believe. Uh, but we're here. I always look forward to this show, our deep conversations about the things we both feel people should care a lot more about than they do. And hopefully, everybody's enjoying the journey so far because we do think it matters a lot, especially now more than ever as we see traditional, you know, funnel tactics, some flywheel tactics, however you want to call it. Like we have less control than ever before over what we want human beings to do in order to give us money, in order to build businesses and create value. So our whole goal is to kind of help you probably cope with that a little bit, that lack of control, but also create paths, create journeys, create experiences for people um, that make that possible. It's not as hard as you think. It's just kind of something you gotta commit to, that you might not be used to. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. The the changes that I think are interesting that are happening right now is the AI is obviously on everybody's mind, and the tooling making so many things easier at scale. This is a pattern that we've seen many times. Those of us my age and older have seen this cycle over and over. Uh, Spam email is a good example that is going to continue to get worse. SEO is a good example as well, historically, where um, tactics getting easier makes it easier to do them in bulk at scale and think that tactics like email or ads or SEO are what marketing is about and what customer acquisition is comprised of. The ease with which they can be measured is also contributes to that. But when we think, oh, we can build outbound agents that prospect companies, find email addresses, and then send 2 million emails out, and it's okay if we only get a 0.001 response rate because that's enough to feed the machine and make the revenue story work,
Oh, man.
despite the fact that most of that is waste. You probably, the people that do read those emails, most of them you irritate, and then you're able to hit with one. It's a little bit like, the venture capital of marketing. That story, uh, when we look at it from the seat of somebody doing prospecting, it seems like, oh, I can save time. Yeah, we're going to churn and burn a bunch of emails and prospects, but most of them aren't going to see them anyway. So when they are in market, it's going to be fine. We'll take a hit on our email deliverability for a little while because we'll get two or three more deals this quarter out of these activities. Uh, when you think about, okay, but you also have three named competitors, 25 indirect adjacent competitors, and then, another 50 alternative solutions to the same problem who are all doing that. It's both a tragedy of the commons, right? Like we're all ruining it for one another. And you are not going to stand out by just taking these new tools and turning the wheel harder, faster, and figuring like, it'll all come out in the wash. You have to play the actual game of marketing. You have to play a different game than your competitors that rush to mechanize their relationships with customers. And, a lot of my experience, for example, has been a lot of companies that I interact with are using AI to remove customer input and interaction, which makes them look like every other competitor who has a support bot that gives an inaccurate answers to what their tools can do and how, and makes it impossible to get help when you have an actual problem that doesn't fit in a checkbox, right?
Yeah.
Um, so uh, the fundamentals of marketing, humans making decisions, has not changed dramatically in the last 100,000 years. Um, so new tools can give us leverage, but we need to think about how we implement those in ways that remove the human aspect from the relationship, that remove the relationship components of
Yeah.
business. Is that, that's my opinion. I
Well,
could be wrong.
here's what's happening in the wash right now, today, right? Like, and I may or may not have said this in the past. I definitely said it. AI and the has the ability to get really good at outbound emails, right? Not just send a bunch, but also figure out which ones work, which ones don't, at a capacity that humans dreamt of for a long time. But will they get good enough, fast enough to outpace the changes that Google and Microsoft make as the email inboxes explode? And what we're seeing right now is the answer is no. All
Yeah.
these email deliverability problems are because the email inboxes are exploding, and Google and Microsoft know that's a terrible experience for the customers, and they want them consuming the inbox, right? Uh, and they're not. So they're making changes, protecting the inboxes. Everybody's getting harder on that side. Also, on the other side, we have, because the humans involved in the buying process do not enjoy this experience, even when the emails do get through. Nico posted video today about the head of Visa, right, coming out with AI agents that buy stuff for people. So that's like, so that is the change. Like, so humans now won't necessarily be the ones making the decisions. They're probably setting up, the agents at some point. Um, so like both of those things are rendering things that we've been doing for a long time just completely, meaningless, if not harmful, in the way that we're presenting ourselves, right? Um, so basically, all you have left is trying to be humans to other humans and build relationships, right?
Yeah.
Um, like how else? There isn't. There's going to be no other path to break through this noise, right? So that's why we're talking about this. Like, we spent the last couple sessions talking about fully appreciating the value path, as I refer to it, specifically, uh, as you called it, before I even came along, the path to value in the beginning, like not a buying journey, not a customer journey, like the path to value, like how am I going to get from where I am to the value that I need,
Yeah.
right? And it's not going to be by some process that refers to me as a lead or a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead or even a subscriber, all the other ways that we've come up with for our processes, right? So it starts there of understanding who they are and what their needs are, right? And in
Yeah.
the path that we went over, the stages I refer to as audience, researcher, hand raiser, and highly empowered revenue opportunity, aka hero.
Hmm.
Um, Now what we want to chat about today is what does our process, we still need a process
Hmm.
internally, but how do we set it up in a way that doesn't just completely destroy the fact that these are humans on the other side, not built to move exactly the way we want to. So what do our deal stages need to look like specifically,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And I've said on past shows, and uh, it's a catchphrase that I use, or one of my many catchphrases, I guess, is that most people set up CRMs to be sales process managers, not customer relationship managers. The degree to which there's a relationship represented in your CRM for, I would I would say probably 97% of companies, the only aspect of a relationship would be anything that's incidentally captured via emails that get logged, or maybe you have a birthday property, or you have a notes property where you put information about their family so that the next time you can get on the phone with them, you can be like, oh, how was your
Yeah.
vacation in Turks and Caicos or something.
That
um,
we inevitably only see that stuff when we need to ask them for something, like when
right.
we go back in, right?
Yes.
So very proactive about that.
Right, exactly. Um, and uh, and I do think, we're talking about customer-centric pipelines. Sales processes are super important, and sales qualification frameworks, MEDDIC, BANT, whatever, are also super important, right? Like one of our abilities or a critical aspect of our ability to serve customers well is not making everything up from zero every time we have someone come to us and say like, hey, I have a problem and it seems like you can help. Having a documented process that we train ourselves and our reps on, we coach for improvement, that is absolutely essential. A customer-centric pipeline doesn't preclude an effective sales process, a documented, effective, and enforced qualification framework, uh, templatized deliverables, checklists, and playbooks. All of those are part of being customer centric. Having a customer centric pipeline means having a sufficient understanding of your customers' needs and journey on that path to value that you can, um, let's say, overlay that on top of the small portion of that path to value that your sales pipeline supports, and then ensuring that you actually build that pipeline and process to support that aspect of the journey. The uh, we often on this show um, rag on the handoff between, say, sales and post sales, whether that's support or service or onboarding or whatever. And we haven't, but I often rag on the marketing to sales handoff as well, where we can tend to be super effective and super ineffective and reductive. Um, those what isn't it, uh, it shouldn't be a goal to eliminate those handoffs. It should be a goal to make those handoffs effective. That's a whole different conversation. My point here is there are, in that path to value, which
Oh,
if we pull
yeah.
up that screen
We'll
share,
pull
and
it back up there.
I'll just pull this up. So this is how we think about it with Who First. I think there's a lot of alignment, but it's a different perspective than Value First, which I'd happy for you to bring in. But path to value is representative of everything that is on the screen right now. The vision of value and moment of magic on the right hand side is the outcome. When we think about a non-customer centric pipeline, our outcome is closed won. When we are thinking about a path to value, we have the vision of value or moment of magic are categories of outcome for our audience profiles and for a specific buyer that we are engaging. We want to define what that looks like for complex purchase decisions. A vision of value is defined before they have raised their hand or have talked to anybody at your company, except for perhaps on social media. They have a picture of like, I kind of understand my problem, which is their place of pain on the left. And their vision of value is when it's solved, the following things will be different. I will not have some things, some problems will be removed from my life, some opportunities will be realized. some things I won't have to worry about, but it's always an incomplete understanding of their future that is defined by when they start that path, right? Like I may not, if I'm buying anything from a computer to a car to a house or to a pair of shoes, there's a gap between what how I picture that in my head and when I drive off the lot or walk out of the store or open the laptop for the 200th time or wear the shoes running for the first time, right? Like that eventual future, we can't, because of the way that time works, we can't fully describe that for someone. They have a vision of value and we want to align with that. And the path to value is what takes them there. So a customer in the Who First framework, a customer centric pipeline in HubSpot, which is what we're talking about here, is largely focused on how we execute our sales process, fully aware of the traps, gates, and signposts that affect their experience of that path. Um, I'm gonna just pull up a mock-up of a sales pipeline as often constructed, just to talk about. This is the framing that I'm using. I want to throw it to you to talk about the value first perspective on this. But this is a mock-up sales pipeline that is the use case here is a company that B2B that sells products and services around training and development, learning, knowledge assessments, development of your team internally. So it's a complex B2B sale, multiple stakeholders, managers, HR, economic buyer, all of that, right? But our stages are pretty basic. You qualify them, you do discovery on their needs, they do an evaluation, and then proposal, pricing, negotiation, et cetera, and then closed, won, lost. When I the many times that I've worked with people to create a sales pipeline in HubSpot or figure out how does marketing do sales enablement to support a buying process like this. This is the kind of stuff that every business is able to articulate. It's easy to, the word I used earlier, mechanize and have your qualification criteria overlaid, have checklist style like, yes, they are qualified to move to the next stage, or no, we can close lost them. But when we think about pipelines with inputs that only come from what we need to accomplish in order to close a sale, then we are not only going to poorly support our prospects against the dimensions that they actually use and experience to make these decisions. We're not, we are going to not seem like we get it or them or are able to effectively support them. But that is also going to produce worse outcomes for us in terms of closing won deals and helping them reach that vision of value post sale, right? Like an effective sales process. Okay, sure. It ends when you hand off to post sales, right? But it's like there's a half-life to an effective sales process. The more effective it is, the more effective the company is, however you want to measure it, NPS, retention, whatever, the longer after the sale as well. So that's why we need to get this right and make sure that our pipeline, that we construct our sales pipeline to support that critical middle part of this journey where we are helping them navigate through that path to achieve the value that they're looking for. So you can pull me my screen share off there, or if you want to leave it to talk about
Well, I think
value first.
yeah, if we could, it's interesting because we didn't talk about any of this prior. Um, and it's interesting seeing this because I pulled up, some pipelines. I've only been able to achieve this with one person, um, where it is like as you show this and as you showed the activities, and had a great chat uh, with John Helena and Mike. Um, I'm not remembering last name right now. Sorry. Last week about a similar sales framework that's designed, based on the customer journey. Um, this willingness to let and a lot of people want to push this into the stages, like the activities, all the activity that needs to happen. That's why we always see like a proposal or quote stage, right? Because we know it's a thing that needs to happen,
Right.
right? And when it does, we can apply these ridiculous, forecasting metrics like, oh, 70% win, uh, you know, um,
Yeah.
probability that we're going to win this one. So guess what? Sales tries to quote as soon as possible,
Right.
like in those situations, right? Because then the pipeline looks better. Um, but back in 2018, as I started talking about this challenge, because that was fresh off, so I had known HubSpot for like a year and a half, fresh off of they ask you answer, story brand, like all this stuff was just shift the mindset. So naturally, these stages like back then don't make sense. Like qualification, like they don't, what are we actually doing? Like, and how do we show it? Like, so that everybody on the team can understand this is the stage that's in, this is what has or hasn't happened yet. And we got to this point where it's like, okay, the stages that we have now in that account, which again don't align with the idea of building for conversion, like rate management and but it's assess the opportunity is stage one. Um, Prove our value is stage two. And then it goes right to like decision made, stage three. And stage four is in purchasing. Like sometimes, like if there's a layer there,
Right.
like that, it's like, okay, we got the verbal, but we haven't gone through purchasing yet.
Yeah. Or
So,
procurement, if there's a
right.
procurement
Yeah.
department in
So nothing's
industry.
for
Yeah.
sure. And it's so often that stage, that stage costs companies a lot of money
Yeah. Both
because
in
they'll
terms
just,
of slowdown and lost deals. Yeah, for
right.
sure.
Sales sits back and they don't like bird dog it like they need to. And then it's like, oh, new year, new budget. It's not, sorry, something else has come up. So like that's where it's like telling us. So like, and my favorite thing is to prove our value stage, right? Because all the things that we usually put in the pipeline, um, like they relate to some activities.
Right.
So it can be hard to like group those activities together in a way that makes sense when you're trying to display data like on a page, right? So when you can take a step back and understand, like if we're in prove our value stage still, that means we have not confirmed that our value has been proven yet. So we've
Right.
got to continue proving our value. That means if the salesperson looks at it and it's still there and it's been a month since I last talked to him, I'm following up. And I don't necessarily need a task to do that because it tells me we haven't
Right.
done our due diligence yet. Right. Um, and that it starts to make this mindset shift a lot easier because it completely takes us away from activity based and all these fake urgency, metrics that
Right.
it's like, oh, close date has got to be here. And it's
Right.
like, well, we've had all the conversations. Like
Right.
the value hasn't been proven, so we're staying here. We're not trying to move it for mechanical reasons, as you said.
Yeah, and there's so much variation from industry to industry. It's that transformation. I think I don't know where this transformation is going. But some of the failure modes that I commonly see are like you just named one, right? Like quote date, which is collected so that someone can analyze the time from quote to close so that you can look back on a quarter or a year and use the aggregate metrics from that difference to build your projections or like a framework for your forecasting for the following um, you know quarter, year, or whatever time frame you look at. And I always like to say every metric needs a co-observant metric, like a stick count metric. If it's like how many leads, if you only report on how many leads, then you're in big trouble. You at least need a rate or ratio metric to keep that stick count metric honest, like lead score quality, something like that. That's an aside. Collecting a metric like quote date, because okay, that means we delivered a quote, we did a thing that is attempting to advance a deal to a closed state. Yes, that's an action that has to happen, right? If we have a sales process where we provide a quote and that quote gets kicked around, approved, signed off on, becomes a contract that then goes to procurement and gets backed off by 20% because that's what the procurement departments are for. Um, Whatever, right? Like none of that. There's nothing that holds that quote date accountable, right, to being at the right point in the process, or a quote that was delivered with a high degree of confidence that it is aligned to the needs and expectations of the prospect. Um, so, like do one of the reasons that this diagram we'll look at in a second represents traps, gates, and signposts as bridging the gap between place of pain where they start and then vision of value or moment of magic where they're trying to reach, is that these are not stages, they are persistent. They exist throughout the process. And when we overlay stages to help us organize our thinking and progression to create, the funnel is an artificial construct.
Right.
But we need, admittedly, a way to organize that work. And maybe that's 6 stages for some businesses and 4 for others. Like that notwithstanding, the uh, I don't I don't know if we will be able to change how people think about pipeline stages. You don't get a lot of adoption of customer centric thinking by coming in swinging for the way that a VP of sales thinks about their sales department. But I think about it as layering, like again, layering the path to value across so that we're like looking up at the customer journey and we're seeing like, okay, we know we have a weak spot here. We're going to come up with a process underneath to support that. Like we have a collapsing bridge and we are trying to figure out how to make it safe for everybody to cross. Because like proving value, there is absolutely a tipping point in every sales process, buying journey, whatever, where where there's like a nail that sticks way out, where there is some dimension of that decision, and it's often emotional on behalf of the buyer, that's like, look, I'm not going any further unless this pre-objection or trap or whatever gets addressed. And then it's like, okay, yes, it is worth me investing in the sale. That there's always a tall one of those that we need to address. But one of the points of signposts is we have to prove our value at every step, every conversation, regardless of the pipeline stage. And different stakeholders come in at different stages of B2B conversations and even B2C conversations. You get a different stakeholder coming in with an opinion. And we need to think to be customer centric with our sales pipelines. Maybe we don't like rename or reorder the stages quite yet, but we need to come in and think like, uh, yes, we have demonstrated at a high level that we have proved our value, but when the stakeholder that represents the implementation team comes in, we have some new value that we need to prove to them, right?
Yeah.
And even if somebody who is just an advisor and not a decider on the buying committee, we are going to have to prove some value to them. And in the Who First framework, a signpost, again, is a category of thing that tells customers, you're like a signpost on the side of the road, you're on the right path, right? Like it says, Austin 24 miles, so that not because there's a fork in the road and you need to choose which to take, but because before we had maps on our phones all the time, you needed reassurance to say like, none of this looks familiar. I'm not. Am I still going the right way?
Yes.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And when you think about customer centric pipelines, every interaction is an opportunity to say like, we're still on the right path, not just because I'm saying it, but because we are demonstrating it to the best of our ability in so many ways based on what we learned about you and past customers and know about your industry and all the success that we've had. So, that I approach it from like, we'll never get that leverage to change, not never. It'll be a long time before we change fundamentally the way that we organize and report on deal stages in HubSpot. So we just need to figure out how we equip, particularly sales and marketing, to be customer centric across that journey for the customer.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, mm. And like, this is why what's on the screen is resonating so much. Because there's a way to say like, okay, we still got to do this, without processifying it, right? Like, which is what happens when, because I always try to think of like the veteran sales perspective, why they don't do things that people want them to do. And quoting is one of those things. Like
Right. Yeah.
when they're having a good conversation with somebody, however long that, they will bring out the documented price and signature whenever they feel it's right and it's time to close, or that somehow solves a gate or is a
Right.
signpost, right? And not before that, just because the process says so, right?
Right. Yeah. And
And
unfortunately, we can't clone those people. It would be nice, like the salesperson that doesn't follow your process and still, hits 200% a quota every quarter.
right.
Uh,
And that's where like, but what we're describing is a way to leverage that knowledge and
yeah.
insight and say, hey, let's not, he didn't need that. He didn't need to do the quote at this time, right? So maybe we shouldn't force it on our process, right? And then how do we build this stuff? And that's where like the generalization of the stages allow for that. Obviously, it's it fits within the bigger system, and you got to be able to track that demos are happening here and quotes are happening here, and like where are they happening in the process? How are we associating it? How do we know when we have proven our value and what's in the
Right.
system to show that, right? But when you think about, so assess the opportunity as an example is saying that's what we're still doing, and we must be still doing that if we haven't built a sales strategy on how we're going to win the deal yet,
Right.
right? Because that's the whole point. Like it, we're still in that mode if we don't understand the place of pain and we don't know the reason to run, right? In the case of this diagram, right?
Right.
And the sales strategy, if we know those things, is okay, what traps, gates, signposts are we dealing with? And how are we going to prove the value? Or in usual terms, I'll say, how are we selling to that, right?
Right.
Have we sold to that yet? And that's where what the message about signposts, when the new stakeholder comes in, it's like, all right, what traps, gates, signposts do they need,
Yeah.
right? And that's why, like originally, this hero stage, as I call it, as a part of the life cycle, or the value path, was obviously I've, from the Ask Your Own Story brand and learning about that, and like story brand is centered around making the customer the hero, right? So it resonated when Chris Walker started talking about it. I think it was high interest revenue opportunity, or that it was an I, right?
Yeah.
And I changed it to E because I wanted it to be spelled right, probably, but also empowered. Like, if we have empowered them
Yeah.
to move forward, they see the signposts, they understand the value at and the reason, like, if we can switch it to say they are empowered and not us, they can take it to other stakeholders in the organization and sell it inside, because they have, like, Josh has given the signpost that now the champion can share with the leader. Says, yep, this is right. It's online with our goals. Like, however you want to look at it. Like you
Right.
mentioned, the implementation person coming in.
Right.
We know what those questions are going to be. How long is this going to take? What kind of
Right.
resources are needed from my team to actually implement this
Right.
life-saving tool that we all
Yeah.
of a
Do
sudden
you
got
have
to
a
buy?
native integration with our stack? Yeah, all of that stuff.
Right.
And those are the easy ones, right? And I'll flip over here in a second to like a mock-up of a version of that pipeline that we looked at that has the traps, gates, and signposts. But um, the point of in Who First, we talk about documented, validated, actionable, measurable audience profiles for your customer, and that depending whether that is at the company level, the consumer level for B2C, at the stakeholder level, even, in a complex multi-stakeholder purchase decision, depends on the context. But we um, if you, I know from experience that if you try to, that it's a lot of work to talk to sales teams to try to back into what are signposts that tell people that they are on the right journey. The you they're hard to come up with in retrospect, and it's not something that most like sales frameworks train on, but you can do some analysis, you can equip the team looking forward, you can do some work um, on call transcripts using AI, but complex multi-stakeholder purchase decisions right now absolutely have signposts. We just don't recognize them. And so we aren't able to effectively leverage them. And I think, again, not to, the point is not to be documented, validated, actionable, measurable in order to be mechanistic. It's in order to have leverage, be able to learn from your successes and then scale that out to the rest of your team so that they know when a particular stakeholder gets involved and you can identify their role and perspective, then you know from your bag of signposts which one to pull out. And hopefully you have already pre-identified that stakeholder's disposition and started equipping your internal champion with those signposts to begin with, right? So
Yes.
it's not, the conversation turns from, what resources do you feel like you need, reading from the script, in order to successfully communicate the value of our solution to your internal buying committee? To, uh, so we talked about your stack looks like X. Your implementation team and companies like this, we typically see that that looks like this, and here's what the resource situation looks like. So I have these 4 different resources that I could provide you. Which of these sound like you think they would be the best received by that team so that they can come with their questions pre-answered, and we can kind of, get further
Yeah.
along. That um, we talked about, the senior salesperson who's hitting 200% of quota every quarter. They get that intuitively, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully have made the requests like that of marketing, and then marketing's like, we don't do that. We just produce one pagers, whatever. But
So those guys, like, have built some of the most
They build them
magnificent slide
themselves.
decks,
Yeah,
right? That and then marketing gets upset
because
because
they're
they're
not on
not using
brand.
branding, and it's
Yeah,
like they don't need, like, they're trying to communicate things.
right.
Uh, yeah,
Right.
and
And
like
they're not always right, like particularly like the integration, the implementation question, for example, is a common one where it's so easy, I've done it, to misspeak to those teams because they've done, whatever, they've done 200 integrations with their stack. You've done zero. You've just heard them described, right? And so then you're like, oh, what do you have? Flux capacitor version 4, whatever, and you don't know what you're talking about. Um, but you know, the point is like if we have these tools, then we and we've built them correctly, then we also recognize when to deploy them and how to, even within the framework of the existing sales pipeline, be more customer centric, because we haven't just been like, well, you know, we're in discovery and there's 4 check marks that say like ready to advance. And so if I've checked those marks, then I advance the deal. And so we should be setting up you know, we should be running the pilot playbook because we're in this stage now, because our check marks that tell us deal is ready to advance, which is a technical decision, can never know the context, the full human context of any individual deal. And maybe the sales rep associated with that deal is the person who's best able to assess whether the deal's ready to advance and what next steps are. But uh, a new rep at the company, not always, and a rep facing a situation they've never seen before, not always. And so sales process helps us with this mechanistic aspect, but having our path to value understood allows us to address the human aspect and introduce that framework into all of the things that we are trying to do to help the customer get from place of pain to vision of value.
yeah, and I'd say
Uh,
that third group is even the best of salespeople under a quota, like that is trying to, because what we see, and especially in the HubSpot ecosystem, like this is like the difference between simple and easy, right? Where we want to make it easy for the sales team to move forward. So we find these, trigger words in a lot of cases. And if you hear this, oh, it's slam dunk. Like this is the value prop you give them, and you just drive that. Don't worry about anything
right,
else. But they're hearing stories from the best salespeople that's like, well, you got to watch out for this stakeholder and this stakeholder and this stakeholder. So it's all known information. Most of the time, this is all well-known information of, um, the traps, the signposts, the gates. But instead of like, we're not just saying go deploy everything, right? But be ready and try to be proactive instead of trying to think you can sell without engaging those stakeholders.
right.
Because that's
Uh,
where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, but I think we can get this through, like, because wherever we go like, well, if you sign right now, I can give you, discount, and it's the best price. And we think that, and I can tell you from experience, even when that works, those stakeholders are just sitting around the corner, like to just
oh
wreck
yeah,
implementation. So instead of pretending that you can get the deal done without, like, you can try to avoid these stakeholders, because when we get into that mindset and they come in, right, especially when it's purchasing,
yeah. Purchasing or procurement.
salesperson's like, oh, purchasing's involved, it's out of our control now,
Yeah,
like, and it's like,
yeah,
no, it's not.
yeah,
It
yeah.
might be
And
now because
right,
you approached it that
because
way.
yeah, yeah. If you drop if you drop a bowling ball off of Niagara Falls, yeah, it's out of your hands, but it's because you dropped it.
Yeah,
Yeah, the I like to say it's never price. It's like, oh, we discount if you can buy. It's like, yeah, it's always value.
right.
Um, so that's hard to see here. So this is just by way of example. I've taken that same because the rubber meets the road on, okay, well, what do we, in our case, build in HubSpot in order to support this? And the answer is depends on your situation. But I've taken the same pipeline here with the same prospect and sales activities. These are the things that end up being properties or checkboxes or fill in fields in playbooks in HubSpot. And we need to layer in based on our documented, validated, actionable, measurable understanding of who our customers are when they are making um, as they are making their way from, hopefully, as part of your sales process, from their place of pain to their vision of value. Traps, what are the things that are going to stop them? And so if we there's different kinds of traps, but one of them is dead ends, which is like when you for the short version of this is when your stakeholder sees along that journey. Well, if we go down this path, I can see a dead end down there. So, or it looks like a dead end, or it looks like a dead end I've seen in the past on this complex journey. So we're not even going to go that route, right? A a dead end in our evaluation stage where multiple stakeholders are coming together to say, you know, uh, maybe they're comparing more than one tool, though shockingly, evaluations often happen where companies aren't comparing more than one tool. But if they foresee an implementation challenge in evaluation, you're toast.
Yep.
So we need to have thought ahead about that, documented the kinds of the kinds of implementation challenges that we might foresee, that we have heard in the past, that whether they are valid or not. Like a lot of companies say like, oh, well, we have a HubSpot integration, so that's fine. Anybody that is ever on the other side of the table from me who says they have a HubSpot integration is in for a serious earful,
Yeah.
because I've seen so many HubSpot integrations that do nothing basically. Um,
Yeah.
so we are gearing up to support their evaluation, knowing that there are dead ends around implementation challenges, and that can mean sales enablement content is how we address that. Um, it can mean like, yeah, even product work. Like there's what that actually means depends on the situation, depends on your business, obviously, right? But we are not just trying to think in each stage, uh,
Yeah.
what criteria do we need to check off? What actions need to happen in order for the deal to advance? We need to think about like, what are they trying to accomplish in this stage, our customer, and how do we come in from below to support that, right? So we're evaluating the things that would stop them. It isn't
Yeah.
just like, oh, they ghosted us, right? Which is what everybody says. Um,
Yeah.
you'll when somebody
And
ghosts you,
just
you'll never be able to do a post-mortem, but they probably ghosted you because you screwed one of these things up, right?
yeah. Quick request
Um,
from John here.
yeah.
Looking for a PDF of these examples.
I will PDF them and need to put that on my immediate follow-up action item.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, it's a
PDF for
great example. And
John.
it dead ends. They're dead ends because it's a path that you've chosen,
Right.
right? It doesn't mean it's the only path. And exactly what popped into my head is, especially when talking about HubSpot, like, of course, best end game is integration of all the systems and all the data in one place. But the difference between integration with your ERP is required versus integration would be nice. Like, if you say it's required, that's like, oh, now we got to get that team involved. Like,
Yeah.
those projects don't happen. So I
Yeah,
guess
you
I
have to
can't have
scope
HubSpot,
those. Yeah,
right?
that's a three. You got to either you can say, oh, we have a integration with your thing via like App Store, check, or that's a three. Which I mean is an invalid answer to that dead end,
Yeah.
or it's an ERP integration to actually scope, if you've done one ERP 1,000 times, then sure, like you can probably scope it pretty quickly. But the first 3 times, the first 10 times, any given ERP, like it's going to take you a month to get scope on that, because it's going to take you 2 weeks just to get the right people on a meeting, right? Um, so
Yeah.
that's why, like, and this is another one, the first step here. So the first step trap um, is, if I can get my Zoom working, uh, again, this is like the concept here is like an L&D system. The number of times I've seen that particular decision go awry at the evaluation stage is really high, because companies think like, yeah, our current process of like, we send out emails of like, hey, you guys are screwing up, change your process. That didn't work. And then we made videos and nobody watched them. And so like, we know this is a big pain point. We know it's a problem. We know we're going to have to invest to roll it out. And like, this tool looks good. The UI looks good. The pricing is right. And then you get the evaluation and you're like, okay, like, we got a verbal commit before that you said like, if we meet all these needs, you're ready to advance. And so like, let's talk about pricing finalization. And they say like, that's great. We just kind of realized that we need to create like so much content to like enable this solution to get it rolled out. So if we were to like sign next month, it would take us like a quarter to like even build the content before it's ready. Spoiler alert, it never just takes a quarter. Um, so then the reality of like, we need to spend money here. The solution is great. It's our fault about content. That derails so many. And for CRMs like HubSpot, it's like, oh, we should update our sales process at the same time. We should update our sales training at the same time. We should clean up our data, and we need to do data migration. Oh, we got to think
Yeah.
about like our other systems, and like, oh, are we going to change invoicing and bookkeeping to HubSpot? Are we going to keep QBO or whatever? And so we need to make that decision, right? Like, those are all in traditional sales frameworks, those end up being called sales objections, right? That's a bad way to think about them, because
Yes.
really they're
Very badly.
opportunities to help the prospect, not to like knock out their objections so they'll sign and then you can just move on and who cares if they're successful. But it's a trap, right? Like, our L&D is so broken that we can't even, we need, you know, we need to hire 3 people and we got to get them trained, but it's so broken that we can't. So all we're going to have to do, we're going to have them shadow our least bad person on each task, and then hope by osmosis they learn it and that they work out and they stay for more than 9 months. Um, but we can't move forward because we don't feel like we have the content, right? Like, that is not an objection, right? That is an opportunity to revolutionize the life of your customer if
Yeah.
you can recognize these traps ahead of time. And all of these, we're coming up on time here, but all these other aspects, same thing, right? Like a signpost again that tells you on your right track, you're on the right track. Early in a decision process, those are kind of general, but the later you get into the decision process, for example, a signpost, signposts are, there's a number of different kinds of signposts, but an important signpost, particularly, it seems counterintuitive, but particularly in multiple stakeholder, complex B2B decisions, emotional, I don't think my diagram has it called out here. It doesn't. It's the other version. Um, are actually emotional decisions, because if a internal champion is sticking their neck out about something, I mean, if anyone who has worked with multiple businesses from the outside has more than one time seen somebody get fired because they championed the wrong tool. I've seen it explicitly about a half a dozen times. I bet it was a factor in other cases where somebody had to leave because they changed an internal tool and process change that was long, expensive, ended up going overtime and over budget, and then didn't meet the need. And boy, is everybody in trouble at that point, right? So like, a signpost that along that journey tells somebody who is advocating for your solution to their problem, if somebody on the buying committee tells that champion, good job, like this really checks all the boxes, right? That is a sign. Uh, that is a signpost for the internal champion. It is also a signal that you have met the traps, the signposts, brought through the gates the rest of the people on the buying committee, except for, the holdout who disagrees and is staying quiet because everybody else is pro solution or whatever. But that is we don't praise that kind of stuff enough when we are thinking about customer centric buying journeys, path to value. That we again, the senior salesperson is like fantastic if somebody actually surfaces that to someone who isn't our mythical salesperson, then they will say, okay, fantastic. And they will recount that in their one-on-ones or in their postmortems or whatever. But if we want to be customer centric with our sales pipelines, we need to find these kinds of things and we need to figure out how we support them. And then we need to scaffold that process, whether that means like identifying the questions to ask, identifying the content that we need to make, identifying when people are engaged, how we judge feedback from them, how willing we are to ask for honest feedback about the decision making process and enter into consultative discussions rather than explicitly just like sales process driven discussions, right? Like a signpost. This is, I don't have it called out here, but there are a few things that engender trust in a sales context, as much as saying something like, well, it seems like we screwed that one up, or you said these are your priorities, and I know that two of these four we have covered. I am not worried about that. Here, you've got these other two things, and let me tell you why I think those might be a problem. Or you're right, we're not good at number three. Or you didn't ask, but I'm just going to tell you, we're not good at number three, and let's talk about what that might look like, right? Um, those those things, that's part of a consultative sale, obviously, but those become uh, high leverage emotional signposts on
Yeah.
that journey, right? And so, like I said, just to sum this up, the
So it's not always. So what I'm hearing is signposts aren't always, uh, you know, proceed to go collect $200. Sometimes they're
no,
stop signs.
no, because the path to value belongs to your prospect, not to you, right?
Yep.
And so the NPS has this framework of if you have a profitable customer who is uh, who's a whatever 6 or below on NPS, then it's poison profits, right? And if you sell somebody and they don't actually achieve that value, you end up being counterproductive on the path to the value that they are trying to achieve. I would describe that as poison profit as well, right?
Yep.
And so the altruistically, which maybe is naive, you want to be a signpost on that path to value, particularly if a business is long, or maybe there isn't a perfect solution, right? And instead of having a bad fit customer that you undersell and underdeliver, when they realize like, well, yeah, you don't do number three, but we can mitigate that. But you do number one and two on my list really well, and nobody else does. So we're going to come back and go with you. Right? That sucks to hear when you're trying to hit your Q2 goals or whatever,
Yeah.
but
I
that's the
mean,
reality of the market.
yeah. I think my favorite one that most people hate is when, especially in SMB land, when the owner or some leader is the one driving the HubSpot like sale, and there's nobody around to manage HubSpot,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, you can get them riled up and excited, especially for lead gen, right? but then if they're the one, if they're the ones, like if they end up being the accidental admins, there's no chance like for that HubSpot
Yeah.
implementation, right?
Yep.
And so it's taking a step back. And that's for leaders in those positions. They want to hear that. And
Right.
they will invest in a brand new role or a brand new agency relationship if they believe in the value of something like a HubSpot, and it will help them grow by millions of dollars,
Right.
right?
And you can like a lot of time that's a good example of a scenario where, I said vision and value is an incomplete understanding where we're trying to reach. They are falling victim to the XY problem where they're like, well, we need sales process, I need visibility. I don't know where deals, I don't know what the situation is. I need to know what's going on in my pipelines. And their experience pachinkos them into, okay, HubSpot. My choices are HubSpot or, whatever, name your alternative CRM or automation platform. And so they have gone to the bias to action. They've gone to, okay, I can buy HubSpot and it can solve this problem. Again, the consultative sale of, um, okay, let's talk about vision and value, not what you want to buy, what you're trying to achieve, right? Because that is how you are able to contextualize it with like buying HubSpot is a step on that path. It is not the end of that path to value, right? So we need to talk about once you get to that point, what that bridge is. And we did not wait until we've quoted you, right? What HubSpot, what hubs and plans you need. We need to
Right.
back up and ask the bigger questions.
Yeah. And this is why, like, if it's a budget conversation like that we're in, like, we're just always in a bad spot because, like, generally there's some growth goals. And that's why you bring in HubSpot. Either there's operational inefficiencies in the way of those growth goals, or there's a lack of pipeline, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they're coming. And that's where, if those goals are anywhere near millions, like, and we can't, not only can we not prove the value of like 1,000 or, a few $1,000 a month, um, and then still we're afraid, like the cost of an admin, like if those two things together, let's say 100,000, like makes 5 to $10 million of growth, like of course they're gonna do that,
Yeah.
right? But they can't possibly do it if they don't connect those two things, right? Because they've likely never have had to do this before, or last time they did it, they did pay this much. And since they didn't have the admin, since they didn't have the person actually
Yeah.
there to own the product implementation, they're disbelieving. They've got a bunch of baggage. And this is why, you know, all they can do is hover around the cost conversation and manage
Yes.
that, because it's how am I managing risk at this point? And that's where we're not in a place to win those deals.
Yep.
So
You just named, we can wrap it, but you just named one of our other categories of traps, which is false start. I tried this before and it didn't work, whether it's category, specific product, mindset.
yeah.
Gotta
Um,
know.
and that's where it's like obviously a little bit different for each business, but there's lots of standardization that can happen. And that's why it's a
Hmm.
lot easier than you think. But obviously, looking at these diagrams, like it feels complex, it feels overwhelming, but just the power of doing that part first. That's why we say like modeling and mapping is 95% of a HubSpot. Like the build out, even the
Yeah.
integrations, like that's the easy part, right? Deciding which data needs to go where, who's doing what inside the system, what does our process need to look like? That's the hard part. But if you
Yeah.
do that part, that's where if like you're investing 50 to 100K, like why the hell aren't you doing that part?
Right.
And that's where it gets to like, oh, they said HubSpot would do this for me.
Right.
And it's like, well, I'm sorry they said that, but that's not the truth. And
Right.
but here's the path we can take you on. Like this is every conversation I have when the first one is like, I need automated data cleanup. It's like, okay. Um, and then you get to the ERP or the accounting system eventually, and that's like, okay, if I had tried to serve this with any kind of free audit or low cost, like, okay, I'll come in and clean the data. And it's like, by the way, this integration is causing duplicate like data,
Right. Yep.
and there's nothing you can do to stop it because we decided not to deal with the integration. That's for somebody else. And that's what these leaders have had to deal with like forever for the life of SaaS. Um, and that's why we implore you to think about this stuff differently, like it, because those are the long-term, high lifetime value clients that you can get. At least in the space. I'm obviously talking about this space now, but
Right.
really any space, like just be upfront, be honest, and it once you know them or once they feel like you understand their journey, like all this stuff gets easier. They want a trusted advisor, like
Yeah.
in most of these situations. So, oh, it was a journey today.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not even that like it's not a long like in terms of it's like sometimes we just build into these stages and it's like okay, that mindset, that checking the boxes mindset is what takes us on the wrong path. It's almost impossible to look at it from the customer's perspective,
Yeah.
when you do that. So hopefully this was helpful, man. It was helpful for me to
Yeah.
understand.
Great.
Um, so
I always love talking about it.
yeah. So until next time, take a look at the sales processes, the buying journey, find those opportunities, and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.